Let's bring in right now author and presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. She's, of course, a regular on Meet the Press. And it was on yesterday's episode, looking back at Tim's life. Doris, tell us what it was like being on that set, being in Tim's house.
You know, the hardest thing, I think, when somebody dies, you get through the first days out of shock. But then when you go back and see something familiar where they no longer are, then it's really like a physical blow. Just walking into that green room, and he wasn't there. He used to call me Professor. He'd come, "Hello, Professor, how are you?" And then, of course, going into the actual set and seeing that vacant chair. You know, my mother died when I was 15 years old, and nothing struck me until I got home from the funeral and saw the chair where she loved to sit and where she would read to me when I was a little girl. My father died when I was in my 20s, and when it really struck was when I went to the next baseball game, since he and I had so shared that love of baseball. So seeing that vacant chair there just almost undid us all. You know, there's this amazing song from the Civil War. It's a haunting song about a soldier who has died, and the first Thanksgiving comes, and they write about, "We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair." So it was a tough day, but, you know, I think, as you said, Joe, just the love that was shown him by those colleagues at NBC, who were so many of them there, it made you know that he will live on in the memories of all these people who loved him so.
Talk about the stage we as a country are at right now, and put it in a historical perspective. Why is it that one newsman is having such a profound effect on millions of people? What did Tim have that apparently so many news people and politicians and leaders don't have?
I think it was the personality that he had, you know, that buoyant personality, that sparkle that he had, that made people feel his warmth. It was almost a contagious warmth. That's what they used to say about Franklin Roosevelt, that somehow as you watched him, you could sense his optimism and his warmth. Because so many of the newsmen that we've known in recent years, they just talk straight to the camera, and they are celebrities in a certain sense. But he was a different kind of celebrity, because people did feel, just as you say, that his personality had come through to them. I mean, like so many other people, I've gotten emails from people that I never knew that went to my website, that never knew Tim Russert, but said, "You two must have been old friends because of the way he treated you on the air." And so I think that's what people saw, the way he treated everyone that he dealt with such sense of respect and empathy and humor and warmth, that they felt they knew this guy. I mean, it's a terrible personal loss for the country in a way that we haven't seen in quite a long time.
And Doris, you know, when I think about him as a journalist, you do think about him as a person, because he brought all of his dimensions to the table: who he was, where he came from, his joy, his love. And his storytelling was simple, but it was great because of who he was.
That's right. He had this kind of plain-spoken wisdom, I think. You know, I've been thinking a lot, because the last time I talked to him, not many days ago, we talked about how he kept wanting to, when the general election coverage came of the campaign, to make it deeper than simply the way we've covered so much of the primary, where it's whoever said what that week in a campaign, who made a mistake, who was wearing a cleavage-revealing dress, and rather to understand that leaders have strengths and weaknesses, and you want to find out what they are by looking into their past lives, looking into the way they ran the campaign. And so we said, now we've just got two. We can go in depth. And when I think about all the qualities we've talked about on his show, Meet the Press, and on the Tim Russert Show, Tim had those qualities, as I've listened to his colleagues in NBC talk. He had that deep well of confidence that you want in a leader, the ability to share credit with ease, to acknowledge errors when you made them, to make other people feel good about the jobs they were doing, to communicate well in a very simple way so people understood, to analyze things well. All those things that he and I talked about that were the marks of the great leaders, whether it was Roosevelt or Lincoln, he had as a leader in NBC. And that's a side of him I'm not sure that people who saw him as the communicator and the Meet the Press person would have known. And I'm not sure I fully realized it as much until I listened to the outpouring of people, and even Joe this morning talking about what a leader he was.
You know, Doris, when you were writing your historical works on Lincoln, on Roosevelt, you would have to sift through papers and try to figure out Lincoln's rivals, what were they saying about him. It was a painstaking process. Do you suspect 50 years from now, 100 years from now, the first transcripts of history will be Tim Russert, what he did from 1991 to 2008, being again, in this information age where we've got 200 channels and we've got the internet and we've got talk radio, there still really was one place where newsmakers had to go to gain legitimacy, right?
Get on record.
No, I think that's right. You know, we're living in a world now where there aren't as many rituals as there once were. And even television, as you suggest, is so diverse. But Sunday mornings was the place who anybody cared about politics had to go. And what those transcripts will show 100 years from now, we're not going to have diaries. People don't keep them anymore. People don't spend their hours at the end of a Civil War day writing long letters to their families. So what we're going to have in this broadcast world are those extraordinary interviews with all the most important people of the decades that he was there, and not just what they said, but you can tell when you look at those interviews, because the videos will also be there, you'll be able to tell how did they react to the questions. Did they have humor? Did they ruffle when he said something mad? Did they look angry? Were they able to acknowledge that, yes, you got me, or were they just trying to say, no, I didn't really say that, until he put it up on the screen? So you're going to get the personality of the people that talked to him as well as Tim's, and it will be the record for the future. There's no question about that.
All right. Doris, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to be here.